I've been trying to start this video for the last several minutes, but I can't stop singing like Cher. No matter how hard I try, and I can't break through. I can't straighten myself out, y'all. I'm just silly. Hi. Good evening. We are here for our secret sermon late Saturday night. We're well into the 1 o'clock hour. And we're here for our secret teachings of Jesus, where I wanted to read the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I just didn't know when I was going to have time to do that, so I decided to make it a weekly segment with us. So welcome in. Basically, we are now in the Gospel of Philip. This is a gospel. Some of them are more narrative, and they have more conversation and dialogue going on. But the Gospel of Philip is more like portions of these cryptic paragraphs that are food for thought, kind of like mental yoga. That's the way I like to describe it. And so I am not a theologian or anything. I'm just interested. And then what I will do is I'll read the portion to you, and then we'll go back through and we'll unpack it line for line, and I'll give you the impressions that I'm getting through like download. And yeah, we'll just enjoy ourselves. Buckle in. All right. So, a couple of notes that I like to point out is that the Hebrew mystics find it beneficial to study late at night, starting at midnight and going till dawn, because for starters, midnight is a very powerful time of day. It is the end of one day and the beginning of another. So it's this liminal space where the veil is very thin between the material realm and the non-material realm. Also during that time of night, there is something called surrounding light that is protecting you, because at the beginning of the day, you have it's like the totally full 100% like best, most positive energy. And so the positive quality of the energy sort of gets depleted as we lose light during the day, right? So like at midnight, where the light is starting to grow and become full through the day. But once we hit, dawn, however, I guess afternoon. But for the sake of this discussion, midnight and dawn are the most positive times of day. So once we start to decreasing the light through the day, the positivity starts decreasing as far as like the energetic influence, right? So basically, during this super positive, super protected time of night, we have the ability to tap into the wisdom even deeper and glean more from it. And usually when we tap into wisdom, we're receiving this light, right? And in order to receive the light, we have to prepare the vessel for it. And in order for the vessel to contain the light, we have to go through this process of embodying the wisdom that we learn. So we actually have to sort of like walk through these experiences, and sometimes it can be a little chaotic or a little unpleasant to like actually embody these lessons. So when we study during this time of like very positive hours and the surrounding light, it's sort of like we get to take in the wisdom without having to maybe go through the process that sometimes comes along with the study. So just little bonuses there. Okay. So tonight's portion is fairly small, but that doesn't usually mean that we're not going to get out of this in under 45 minutes. But I'm going to try to do it tonight. So tonight's portion is called Wisdom and Wisdom of Death. There is Ekhamoth, there is Ekhamoth, and there is Ekhamoth. Ekhamoth is simply wisdom, but Ekhamoth is wisdom of death. That is the wisdom that knows death. That is called little wisdom. Let's read that again. There is Ekamath and there is Ekmath. Ekamath, or Ekamath, is simply wisdom. But Ekmath is the wisdom of death. That is the wisdom that knows death. That is called little wisdom. There's a footnote here. Let us go to the footnote. This passage seems to reflect the Valentinian distinction between higher wisdom, often called Sophia, and a lower wisdom, often called Akamoth or Achamath. So there is Achamath and there is Achmath. Achamath is simply wisdom. But Achamath or Achmath is the wisdom of death. That is the wisdom that knows death. That is called little wisdom. So the Achamath is Sophia. Sophia is higher wisdom. It's the wisdom of the upper realms. It's the wisdom of the non-material. It's the wisdom of the 99% of reality, which is all the mysteries and all of the dimensions that come before this little one singular physical dimension, this material dimension. So Akmoth is the wisdom of death. That is the wisdom that knows death, which is little wisdom. We know death. The material world knows death. So this is the comparison between the wisdom of the upper realms and the wisdom of the lower realms, which is our realm. The wisdom of the material realm. This is the difference between a person who has wisdom of the spiritual reality, the spiritual laws, the metaphysical, the esoteric, the person who understands the depths of the soul and believes in spirit and believes in miracles and believes that there is something beyond what we can see, feel, taste, and touch. But the wisdom that knows death, the little wisdom, this is like the wisdom of the person that has common sense, street smarts. They might be very intelligent and learned and well read and study, but they don't believe that there's anything after we die. They don't believe that we have a spirit. They believe that we're just flesh. They believe that it is what it is. There's nothing beyond what we see. Everything's random, nothing's connected, nothing means anything. So, like, these people that have little wisdom, they're very literal. For mystical people, it's very frustrating. You're dealing with a very literal person who doesn't believe in anything beyond just like cause and effect. Even if they see miracles happening, it's like they're like, oh, there's some kind of explanation. And it's not that you can't, like, just because like a cake appears out of thin air doesn't mean that it's still not made out of like eggs and flour and sugar. But like the mystical person with the higher wisdom would be like, oh my God, this cake like appeared out of thin air. It's a miracle. And then the person who is like got the wisdom of death would be like, I mean, a cake is a cake. Like, it came from somewhere. There's got to be some kind of explanation. Like, we all know what a cake is made of. It's not magic. You know, you'd be like, well, I mean, it's still a cake, but like obviously like the way that it showed up, like the circumstances, like you got to think, you know. So Yeah, that's always fun. It's fun too because if you are a person that is like a manifester, but you're with someone who's like hell bent on being like just like this literal like material world person who doesn't believe in like whimsical fancy, it's so funny because it's like the people who are manifestors and they're in on the high upper wisdom. It's like we're having this grand old time. And like Funny Dud next to us is like determined not to look stupid by believing in the magic, and yet they're like missing out on like the whole of like what's actually going on. So it's like the joke's still on them. But yeah, Jesus had a very frustrating time with his disciples. And we learned this when we studied the book of James, the secret book of James, which if you haven't seen those videos, I would go back and watch those. They're going to be like earlier in the playlist, but like we went through the secret book of James and it was all dialogue. It was all scene work. And Jesus was like, it's funny because I like that the gospels that got hidden were always the gospels where Jesus is a bit salty. And he's not like sweet little porcelain plate Jesus. He's like giving people like the business and like telling it like it is. And so in the secret book of James, like Jesus is so frustrated because he's trying to give his disciples this ekmoth, this higher wisdom, this wisdom of the upper realms, this deep spiritual like laws that govern the universe and set you completely free as a divine being within this like material existence. Something that is a precious privilege and gift and a rarity because the people in the material realm are chained down by the limits of the small wisdom because they only believe in like the literal. They don't believe in the miraculous magic that they're actually capable of. And so they don't activate it. And so it's like so funny that we could be these fully self-realized and awakened divine beings that can like part the Red Sea, control the weather, raise the dead, heal the sick, like let the blind see. We can do all these things. We just don't believe that we can. Not enough to actually like activate these gifts within us. Or at least most of us. And yet on the spiritual side, on the soul level, there's all these souls and all these spirits wanting to come through like, oh my God, if you only knew, like you're in the physical, you're where it all happens, and like we're here, we've got powers, but we can't do anything in the physical. Like, I mean, they can make an impression and they can try to, move things and shift, and they can do things, but like what would be really exciting is if they were like, what if you, like, what you could do it? You're like, what if you could actually walk on water? Like, fly. It's like, wow. So it's really funny. So it's like, if we could only really, really awaken and embody that upper level, higher wisdom here to the point where we could just work miracles, right? I mean, that's why like manifestation is so fun, because it's like every now and then we'll get our little, oh, I got it to work. Like I got my magic to work, and it's so fun. And then we like short circuit again because we get attached. And we get attached to the reality of that has the expiration date, the reality that our eyes can see, that our hands can touch, that we can smell, that we can taste. We get obsessed over the illusion of this physical realm. But even this book, none of this is actually solid. This is cells that are so tiny, and so they're like planets, the distance of planets apart from one another, actually at a microscopic level. This is not solid at all. It's just packets of light that are like tiny and so distant in the scale. They're like, this is like the space of the galaxy between cells. Or particles. It's so crazy when you start looking and thinking about particle physics. And what reality is really made of. It's not made of much at all. It's just light. It's very impressionable. It's very mutable. So all of this is like, it is kind of like a hologram or a projection in a way. You know, it's all just this avatar for us to move through and have these experiences in order to work things out, work our stuff out through this life, have experiences, become these multifaceted personalities, you know, and expressions of divine and experiences for divine to have. It's amazing. So there is Ekamoth and there is Ekmoth. Ekamoth is simply wisdom, but Ekmoth is the wisdom of death. That is the wisdom that knows death. That is called little wisdom. Oh, I think earlier I confused Ekmoth and Ekamoth. So Ekamoth is Sophia. That's the higher wisdom. Also, like in Hebrew words, it's funny because sometimes they'll add a letter or take a letter out or whatever to add value to it numerically for the gematria of it all. It's like these numerical values that have esoteric value, which makes sense. So Ekamoth has an extra syllable. It's the higher wisdom. Yeah, and I feel like the smaller wisdom, like the very materialistic people, it's like they feel like they're never really looking into the deeper meaning of why things are happening, right? So like people who have upper realm wisdom, it's not just that they believe in miracles and that they believe that there's a spirit world, but they start to see the connections of these things happening in their life. And why. They start to see the purpose and the poetry behind cause and effect, and the way that you can work with it and anticipate it and understand that and get ahead of it and not live. You can actually start to transcend the world of cause and effect with that upper realm wisdom. With the lower realm wisdom, you're always at the mercy of cause and effect. You're always living in a state of effect consciousness. When we live in a state of cause consciousness, we have affinity with the creator, with the light. We're not affected by stimuli. We're not affected by the winds of change in life. We're not affected when circumstances change, or when the stress and the pressure comes, or when the excitement comes, or when the glory and the fame and you know the acclaim comes. That doesn't change you either. It's like when the high of the love rushes in, and then when it goes, when it fizzles, right? You want to be consistent, sustainable, sustaining, enduring, eternal, right? So you want to be the cause, meaning you decide how you want to feel, how you want to perceive things. You decide the vibration you want to radiate, and you set your dial and you keep it there. And no matter what is happening around you, you've cultivated the kind of self-mastery, self-control, inner peace, trust, faith, certainty that allows you the grounded footing to actually keep your balance. And not really be that affected anymore. You start to transcend it. It's a discipline. It's a practice. But that is a wisdom that transcends death. It rises above. Because really, if we understand that this physical vessel that we put on for a moment comes and goes, but like really there's this eternal part of us that's always there. It's always sustaining. And so that never dies. And so once we get over the illusion that death is real, there's aspects of death. The flesh goes, but that's like throwing an outfit away. The real you are still going to be there. But this is the realm where all the fun stuff happens in. So that's why spirit world and the souls are always on the other side being like, oh my God, take advantage of this time while you have it. Transform, transcend, transmute. And the more of your darkness, the more of your smallness, the more of that little wisdom that you shed in order to adopt that higher wisdom, the more of those powers you step into, right? When we reveal this light and we get rid of all of the gunk that's keeping us dense and weighed down and separate from the light, it keeps us weighed down in like our abilities too, but the more we transcend that heaviness, that denseness, that dullness, that material binding, and we elevate our consciousness and we raise our vibration, it's like these divine healing abilities start awakening in us. Divine intuitive abilities start awakening. These divine gifts start coming online, and we start to be able to like actually work with them and use them. There is Ekmoth and there is Ekmoth. Ekmoth is simply wisdom, but Ekmoth is the wisdom of death. That is the wisdom that knows death. That is called little wisdom. And this is the wisdom of the consciousness of like death. People who are fearing death all the time. They're dying 1,000 deaths all the time, worrying and living their life based on the fact that they're afraid of what happens when they die, what happens after they die. They are fixated on the fact that they're going to die. And so they live in fear and they hold on to everything around them, trying to avoid what is inevitable, but actually is just basically a passage. It's just like taking off your outfit, stepping out of this flesh suit, but you're still there, right? There's no real end. It's just the end of this expression, at least for this incarnation. So yeah, some people are, there's even Christians that have various levels of this upper wisdom versus lower wisdom, this wisdom of death. Like, there are a lot of Christians that aren't even sure that they believe that Jesus, was literally the Son of God. They're like, oh, well, I like Jesus's teachings, but they feel almost silly, like they wouldn't be smart or they wouldn't be considered intelligent if they actually believed in the spiritual nature of Jesus being sent here for the purpose of being the Messiah to uplift the planet, and who performed miracles and who could even raise people from the dead, who actually resurrected himself, whatever that literally means. Because when Mary saw Jesus, she had a vision of him. It wasn't like his body, but his body was gone, but he looked different. So there's a lot to it that we don't quite understand, but there are people who believe in Jesus of Nazareth, who like him, who are followers of his teachings, but they don't actually believe like Jesus, like the Christ, right? Yeah, and so then it makes me wonder, it's like, well, and a lot of those people too, oddly enough, they're not always the people that have separated from the church. Sometimes these are the people at church who are showing up, trying to follow all the rules. But those are the people who are obsessed with the rules because they think that that's gonna get them the ticket, because they don't believe in the whole the spiritual metaphysical aspect of it. The fact that the mysteries of the Eucharist, the sacrifice, the path of the soul. They're just still caught up in the material world, and I don't think that they have a lot of connection to what is beyond this realm, or even certainty that there is anything beyond this realm. there are many believers out there that are just showing up to cover their ass just in case, but they're not really sure that they believe either. And I mean, then there are other people who believe that I've never questioned. And it comes easy. And then there are people who believe because they've seen. And they can't deny what they've seen. And then there are people who have seen who still deny what they've seen. It's like, where are you on the spectrum of wisdom? Are you big wisdom? Are you little wisdom? Are you like upper realms, transcending death wisdom? Or are you like, somewhere in between? Well, I think that we have explored this. But yeah. And then the higher wisdom, I mean, the interesting part, some of these Gnostics, the Gnostic Gospels, get super far out there. Talking about like the other dimensions and the mysteries and all the stuff going on. Like it gets wild. But yeah, I think this is just simply comparing. When you open yourself up to the wisdom of the upper realms, you begin to transcend death. You're ascending. You're ascending your soul. The more you push back against the wisdom of the upper realms and you stay like determined to keep your feet grounded on the material world and in the material world, and you're like, oh, none of this woo-woo, I'm just going to be practical. You continue in a cycle of death because you're constantly having to die to your ego who's attached to this material truth. And you have to continue to go through these cycles of trial and tribulation and testing and learning to shed those blocks that are keeping you blind to the truth of the awe and wonder of reality of God. And so it's like the death is the process that keeps having to go through. You keep having to go through to kill off layers and layers and layers of your ego to finally reveal the light to you. So you can have an awakening. An awakening to the truth of the Ekamoth wisdom. All right, we'll read it through one more time. There is Ekamoth and there is Ekmoth. Ekamoth is simply wisdom, but Ekmoth is the wisdom of death. That is the wisdom that knows death. That is called little wisdom. So we're reaching for that higher wisdom in hopes to transcend death, the process of cleansing, pain, chaos, toil, suffering, lessons, learning those lessons again and again and again. Yeah. And surrendering to the higher wisdom. And transcending. When we transcend, when we overcome our demons, it's really the shadow aspects. And then when we overcome the demons, it's like we transcend them and they become our powers. We have these powers that we wield. So there you go. Chew on that. I'm tired. I hope y'all have a good Sunday, and I will see you tomorrow night for our weekly energy forecast so we can take a look at the week ahead and see what we can expect. All right, y'all. Ciao.